Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3.5 Rules Compendium. This was a late release book for 3.5, came out less than a year before the release of 4th edition, and was a book that was largely overlooked. And it's something that I passed on back in the day, but now it is an absolute necessity for me trying to run 3.5 games in the year 2022. So what this is, it's essentially just the collection of rules from the 3rd edition D&D game. Largely, it's rules from the player's handbook. However, what it does is it expands on them, it alphabetizes them, which I'll sort of talk about in a moment here. And you also get some really neat things like some sidebars. They call them like interludes, for example, as well as just some little things here. I'll see if I can find a quick example of one. These little sidebars here that just kind of give you a behind the scenes peek at what was going on, what the mindset was, what the reasoning was behind creating certain rules or mechanics, or how certain things actually would impact the game and the reasons why they would need to be changed. Cough, cough, polymorph, cough. So yeah, this was a book, again, like I passed on it back in the day because I didn't think I needed it. I had been running 3.5 and 3rd edition combined for 7 years at the time that this came out, and I was relatively comfortable with my knowledge of the rules. And if I didn't know a specific rule, I at least knew where to find it and in which book that I needed to look for. Like it was the Player's Handbook or the DMG or even possibly the Monster Manual. There were lots of other like splat books or supplement books that came out that did introduce some new mechanics and things along those lines. But that's not really about the focus of this one. This is just essentially the core rules, the major rules that you need to run your game. And like I said, I ended up passing on it. However, I found that when I picked up 3.5 again for the first time in nearly a decade, late last year when I started my 3.5 Savage Tide campaign, I realized that, you know what, I'm really rusty on some of this stuff. And while certain aspects of the rules, like confirming criticals and what happens when you're stacking multipliers, like that stuff came back really almost instantly. But then there were things like attacks of opportunity, or like grappling or sunder, like bull run. Like there's just all kinds of other not nearly as often used aspects of the rules that, when they did come up, it's like, okay, I need to look this stuff up. And yeah, my familiarity with the layouts of the core rule books also, after a decade, it's just going to diminish. If you stop to think, like, I picked up several other RPGs in that 10-year span, and you're going to confuse rules, you're going to confuse layouts and all kinds of stuff. So I was really kind of regretting the fact that I never picked this up. And recently it became available on DM's Guild, Drive-Thru RPG, print on demand. And the first day that I went onto the website and saw that this was in the print on demand section, I pretty much immediately placed an order for it. I just got this a few days ago. It was in my my recent pickups video, and I actually got a chance to use it in my most recent 3.5 session, the first 3.5 session that I've run since I actually acquired this. And I got to tell you, it was so easy to look things up. I actually remember, so again, when it comes to the core rule books, they are going to be broken down into chapters, and the chapters are going to be related to one another in certain ways. Like they're going to be based around certain themes. Like the first section, the first several chapters are all about character creation, rolling your stats, what the stats mean, class or races, classes, your skills and feats and equipment and all that stuff. And then you start getting into like the rules a little bit later. But sometimes it's not necessarily, you're not going to have a clear idea of exactly where a particular rule is going to be. For example, one of the things that I had to look up was the grapple mechanics. And in the player's handbook, it's in the combat section, sure, but it's where in the combat section is it? So when that question came up in my most recent session, I grabbed the rules compendium, because rather than getting the player's handbook, opening it up to the back of the book, trying to find the specific grappling keyword in the index and looking at the pages that it lists where grappling is mentioned, because the index will basically tell you any page where that particular key phrase is mentioned or discussed in there. Again, it can be spread out over a wide swath of the book. So, you try to find the one that you think is, which is usually the one that's, in bold, but it's still a bit more of a process. With this one, all I had to do was pick up the book, open it up, and then be like, okay, well, I need grappling, so I'm in, this alphabetically, I'm not at GR yet, so let's just sort of go through here. Whoops. And there I was able to find it. So it was super easy to find, and it's also really well laid out. So you've got initiating a grapple and all the details that go with that, resolving a grapple, the grappling results, things that you can do while grappled or how they're affected while you're grappled, attacking grapplers. Like, it was just a treasure trove of information on grappling that it took me a fraction of the time to find in this book versus trying to find it in the player's handbook. So yeah, if you're looking to run 3rd edition or 3.5 in 2022, either for the first time or for the first time in a while, then this is something that I honestly cannot recommend enough. It's just so user-friendly. It's so easy to find, to follow, and to look through. For example, you've got influencing and interaction. So things like diplomacy, intimidate, hirelings. Like, this is, again, the hireling section would be really good just to be able to have. But if I also wanted to, for example, look up the appraise skill or the details around trying to appraise certain things, then I can just sort of flip back in the book and go to where it has appraise and be able to read all the information here, which is like, you get a full page basically for the appraise rules or mechanics. And it's not what you get in the player's handbook. In the player's handbook, you get sort of maybe this explanation and the table, but you don't get the extra stuff here, like unique items or exotic items or anything along those lines. So you just get a little bit more information. And it also incorporates essentially the errata into the rules. So, for example, if you're someone like me who's really bad at following and keeping up on the errata, for example, then it's going to be really useful. It's going to be really useful to actually have this available to you, because there may be some things that were sort of clarified or sort of updated. So yeah, just again, a really fantastic resource to have. And it's laid out really well. It's a nice clean look to it. You've got the white pages, and so 3rd edition 3.5 had some really fancy sort of like borders around the pages. It also had like sort of almost looked like hand-drawn lines going across where the text would be and stuff like that. And they're really nice looking books, like, don't get me wrong, but I've got to be honest, I kind of just prefer a nice clean like white page, no lines to kind of distract me, and just be able to flip through and find what I need. And I can't stress enough about how much easier it is to find things when they're done in alphabetical order versus where they are in like just a chapter in the core rule books, and where they're grouped in with other similar mechanics, but they're not necessarily, like I said, in an alphabetical order, or you'd be able to immediately just like go to the combat section, immediately find grappling, for example. You might have to go to combat, wade through things like, initiative, surprise rounds, attacks, and damage, and then finally get to the grappling section. So again, here it's just so much easier. You've also got things like bonuses, so it goes into how bonuses stack and which they usually don't, but it also gives you all the different bonus types all right here for you to be able to find. Again, just so much easier. You've got the charge rule. It's just a really user-friendly book to just pick up and flip through. And again, it was when there were only a couple of rules questions that we really had when it came to my most recent 3.5 session, but this was a book that I picked up. This is, the resource that I am going to use going forward from now on with all of my 3.5 sessions, and it's just fantastic for that. It's super easy to use, it's super intuitive, and there's just some really cool sidebars, like I said, that goes into the explanations as to what was going on when certain rules or mechanics were being conceived of, things that the developers had to keep in mind when trying to create new rules or when deciding to get rid of old rules that have become either obsolete or were sort of impeding the flow of the game. This is just an all-around fantastic book. So if you're going to be running 3.5, like I said, if you're interested in 3rd edition, and you're running it either for the first time, because there's a lot of people that are coming into D&D now with 5th edition being as popular as it is, and while not everyone's going to want to pick up newer other games or other editions of D&D, there are going to be people that are going to be interested. And, with something like this, it's going to make running those older editions just so much easier. The Rules Compendium for 3.5, if you're looking to run 3.5, this book, it cannot be recommended enough. Like I said, when I'm running my Savage Tide game, I don't want to have a whole stack of books. I just don't, right? It's a pain. I don't want to do it. And I got to be honest, this is the thing I'm going to go to. I'm not going to, if I'm looking for a rule, I'm not going to try to find it in the Player's Handbook. I'm not going to try to find it in the DMG. This has been my go-to. And I've only had a chance to use it for one session, but it immediately made an impact. So yeah, if you're looking to run 3.5, this is something that I cannot recommend enough. I kind of want to redo my 3rd edition or 3.5 buyer's guide, because I think that was years ago that I did it, and I didn't own this book. Because I stupidly, back in 2007, it's like, oh, I don't need this. I know the rules and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I never thought that I would take a 10-year hiatus from the edition to pick it back up again, all those years down the road, and think naively that maybe I would still have as solid a grasp on everything then as I did at the time. But anyway, awesome book. Absolutely 100% recommend if you're going to be running this version of the game. Whether you're a player, dungeon master, it doesn't matter. Everything that's in here is great for both. And yeah, definitely, like I said, if you're playing 3.5 or running 3.5, if you don't have this, then I do highly recommend it. And you know what, even if you've been running 3rd edition for all this time and you know it inside and out, you know what, sometimes it's still going to be, you're still going to need to look something up, and this is something that, it's going to make that a little bit easier. So I really regret that I slept on this for so long, and took me from 2007 to 2022 to actually pick up and add to my collection. So I regret not getting this like 15 years ago, and it's just an awesome book. Fun to flip through, and super easy, super clean to flip through, super intuitive. Can't recommend enough. Anyway, that was my look at the Rules Compendium for D&D 3.5. If you're running it, get it. I can't stress that enough. And don't try to get, eBay prices, because this is one of those late releases. It wasn't picked up by as many people back then, so there's fewer copies potentially out there in circulation. I've seen this going for ridiculous prices. If you want to add this to your collection, I honestly recommend going to Drive-Thru-RPG or DM's Guild and either getting the PDF or getting the print-on-demand version like I did here. If you want to check it out, there are links to both DM's Guild and Drive-Thru-RPG in the description. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care.